Welcome to Unburied Remnants. The official narrative is just the surface. We dig into what's underneath. And we're just getting started. 8 kings ruled the world before the flood. The first, Alulim of Eridu. He reigned for 28,800 years. The second, Alulgar, 36,000 years. Enmenluahna, 43,200 years. 8 kings, 5 cities, a combined reign of 241,200 years. Then, 3 words. The flood swept over, and everything changed. The next king reigned for 1,200 years, then 960, then 900. Within a few generations, normal human lifespans, forever. This document is real. It sits in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. It is called the Sumerian King List. Nobody disputes its existence. What nobody can agree on is what it means. The Sumerian King List is not a legend. It is not mythology. It is an administrative document, a record of kingship, written in cuneiform on clay tablets, copied and recopied across thousands of years of Mesopotamian history. The oldest known version dates to approximately 2100 BC, but the kings it describes are far older. And the structure of the document is unlike anything in the ancient world. Before the flood, 8 kings, 5 cities, reigns measured in thousands of years. The scribes who wrote this did not treat these numbers as metaphor. They treated them as fact. They listed the cities, named the kings, recorded the years with the same administrative precision they used for everything else. 5 cities that existed before the flood. 5 cities that the Sumerian tradition insisted were real places, not mythological realms. And here is what archaeology has found. Eridu is real. Bad Tibira is real. Larsa is real. Sipar is real. Shuruppak is real. Archaeologists have excavated all 5. They are among the oldest known settlements in Mesopotamia, going back in some cases to 5,400 BC and beyond. The King List says the pre-flood kings ruled from these cities for a combined 241,000 years. Mainstream archaeology says these sites are ancient, but not that ancient. The gap between those two positions is where this episode lives. After the flood, everything changes. The first post-flood king, Jushur of Kish, reigns for 1,200 years. Still long, but nothing like what came before. And it keeps dropping. By the time we reach historical figures that archaeology can actually verify, Gilgamesh, Enmebaragesi, the reigns are measured in decades. Normal human lifespans. There are several ways to interpret the pre-flood numbers. They could be symbolic, a way of expressing the deep antiquity and legitimacy of kingship. They could be based on a different counting system. Some scholars have proposed the numbers work on a sexagesimal base that would reduce them to more plausible lengths. Or they could be what they appear to be, a genuine record of a time before the flood when something was very different. We do not know which interpretation is correct. What we know is that the Sumerians who wrote this document believed the pre-flood world was real, the cities were real, and the flood was the boundary between 2 completely different eras of human history. And we know that on the other side of that boundary, something is underwater. If the pre-flood cities are real, and the archaeology says they are, and if the flood was real, and the geology says it was, then some version of those cities is underwater right now. The question is whether we can find them. Until recently, the answer was effectively no. The continental shelves, the shallow ocean zones that were dry land during the last ice age, are vast. We are talking about areas the size of continents. And until the development of high-resolution multi-beam sonar and remotely operated vehicles capable of sustained deep-water work, searching them systematically was impossible. That has changed. Modern multi-beam sonar can map the ocean floor at resolutions of less than 1 meter. A single survey vessel can cover hundreds of square kilometers per day. Photogrammetry, The same technology used to create 3D models of archaeological sites on land can now be deployed underwater by ROVs, creating detailed three-dimensional records of submerged structures. The technology exists. The question is whether anyone is pointing it in the right direction. Here is the number that matters. We have conducted systematic, high-resolution survey of less than 20% of the ocean floor. The continental shelves, which are the most relevant zones for pre-flood habitation, are among the least surveyed areas. Deep ocean trenches get more attention than the shallow shelves where people actually lived. This is not conspiracy, it is priority. Ocean floor mapping has been driven by navigation, resource extraction, and military interest, not archaeology. The shallow continental shelves sit in an awkward zone, too shallow for deep-sea research vessels, too complex for simple sonar passes, and not obviously interesting to the people who fund ocean exploration. That is beginning to change. A growing number of marine archaeologists are arguing that the continental shelves represent the largest unexplored archaeological landscape on Earth, that the evidence for pre-flood human occupation is not going to be found on land because it is not on land. It is under 120 meters of water, and we need to go and look. I want to be straight with you, because what comes next is not theory. These are real places, real sonar data, real artifacts pulled from the seafloor. Some of it is debated, but none of it is made up. Let's look at what has actually been found, not what might be there, not what the traditions suggest, what physical evidence exists right now on the submerged continental shelves. We covered Dwarka and the Gulf of Cambay in Part 2 of the Flood series. Today, we go further. Doggerland. Between 8,000 and 6,000 BC, a vast landmass connected Britain to continental Europe. It covered an area roughly the size of modern Great Britain. It had rivers, hills, forests, and coastlines. It was home to Mesolithic hunter-gatherer communities who lived there for thousands of years. Then the North Sea filled in. Doggerland went under. Today, fishing trawlers working the southern North Sea regularly dredge up the remains of that world. Mammoth bones, aurochs, skulls, worked flints, tools made by human hands. The occasional human bone, all coming up from the seafloor in fishing nets, pulled from a landscape that has been underwater for 6,000 to 8,000 years. This is not theory. This is happening right now. The evidence is sitting in fishing boat holds and museum collections across the Netherlands and Britain. Doggerland was real. We are finding its remains. The Bimini Road. Off the coast of North Bimini in the Bahamas, at a depth of around 6 meters, lies a formation of large, flat limestone blocks arranged in a J-shaped pattern stretching nearly a kilometer along the seafloor. The geological argument holds that the blocks are beach rock, naturally fractured limestone that forms flat, regular shapes along ancient shorelines. The archaeological argument holds that the regularity and arrangement of the blocks, combined with the presence of what appear to be intentionally placed fitting stones, exceeds what natural processes can explain. What is not disputed? The formation sits on a continental shelf that was above sea level during the last ice age. If it is human-made, it was built before the post-glacial inundation. The Cuban underwater structures. In 2001, a Canadian exploration company conducting sonar surveys off the western coast of Cuba detected something unexpected. At a depth of approximately 600 to 700 meters, far deeper than the post-glacial sea level rise can account for, sonar images showed what appeared to be regular geometric structures covering an area of approximately 2 square kilometers. Subsequent ROV surveys produced images of what appeared to be smooth, flat surfaces, right angles, and pyramid-like formations. The exploration company's lead researcher, Paulina Zelitsky, described the site as a possible submerged urban center. The honest position on Cuba: the depth is the problem. 600 meters is too deep to be explained by the post-glacial sea level rise, which accounts for roughly 120 meters. For these structures to be human-made and submerged, either the ocean floor has subsided significantly in this area, which is geologically possible, or the structures have a different explanation. Full excavation has not been conducted. The site remains unexplained. What the Cuban site does, along with Doggerland, along with Dwarka, along with Bimini, is establish a pattern. Across multiple ocean basins, on multiple continental shelves, in multiple cultural contexts, there is evidence of human activity in zones that are now underwater. The pre-flood world left traces. We are beginning to find them. Here is what the Sumerian King List and the underwater sites have in common. Both point to a world that existed before the flood. A world with cities, with rulers, with continuity across vast stretches of time. A world that the post-flood traditions remembered and wrote down and preserved, because the people who survived understood that what had been lost was worth remembering. The 5 pre-flood cities of the King List, Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larsa, Sippar, Shuruppak, sit in southern Mesopotamia. Their locations on the pre-flood coastline of the Persian Gulf would have placed some of them in zones now submerged by post-glacial sea level rise. Not all of them. The Persian Gulf flooding sequence is complex, and not all of these cities would have been coastal. But the tradition insists that civilization began in this region, in these cities, before the flood. And someone survived to write it down. Stay with me here, because this is the part that stayed with me when I was putting this together. Not the numbers, not the sonar images. This. Someone sat down after the worst catastrophe in human history and wrote a list. A list of who ruled and where and for how long before the water came. They wrote it because they believed it was true. They copied it across generations because they believed it mattered. The Noah tradition, the Manu tradition, the Utnapishtim tradition. In every case, the survivor preserves. They carry seeds, animals, knowledge. The covenant is not just survival, it is continuity. The King List is continuity. It is someone saying, this happened. These cities were real. These kings ruled. The flood came. But we remember. What did they build in 241,000 years of combined rule? That is the question the ocean floor may one day answer. Here is the honest position. We have not found a pre-flood city. We have found evidence of pre-flood human occupation. In Doggerland, in Dwarka, in the Gulf of Cambay, along multiple continental shelves. We have found submerged structures whose origin is debated. We have found artifacts dated to before the post-glacial inundation. But we have not found the excavated city, the deciphered writing system, the datable monument that puts a sophisticated urban civilization on the continental shelf at 10,000 BC. That may be because such a civilization did not exist. The pre-flood world may have been exactly what mainstream archaeology says it was. Small communities of hunter-gatherers and early farmers, sophisticated in their own ways, but not the kind of civilization the Sumerian King List seems to describe. Or it may be because we have searched less than 20% of the ocean floor, and specifically avoided the shallow continental shelves where the evidence would be. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It is evidence of insufficient search. What changes in the next decade? Autonomous underwater vehicles capable of sustained shelf surveys at low cost. AI-driven sonar interpretation that can flag anomalies for human review. International archaeological interest in the continental shelves as a research priority. The technology is coming. The question is whether the will to use it follows. If one confirmed pre-flood city is found on a continental shelf, one site with clear architectural evidence, datable to before the post-glacial inundation, with artifacts indicating urban organization, it changes everything. Not just archaeology, history, the human story, how long we have been here, what we built, what we lost. That city may be down there. We are only now building the tools to look. Across 9 episodes, 10 if you count both parts of the flood, we have built a case, a world before our world, governed by kings who ruled for lengths of time the post-flood mind cannot easily process, organized around coastlines we can no longer see, with traditions, flood stories, divine counsels, forbidden knowledge, the memory of a golden age that appear in every culture that came after, independently on every continent, ended or severely disrupted by a catastrophe approximately 12,900 years ago, whose survivors moved to high ground and carved in stone everything they could remember. At Göbekli Tepe, at 100 places still under 100 meters of water, whose traditions were absorbed into the civilizations that came after, into Sumer, where the King List preserved the memory of who ruled before the water came, into Egypt, into the Hebrew Bible, into the Greeks, into the Norse, into the traditions of every people on earth who tells a story about a time before, a golden age, a world that was lost. We do not know if this is what happened. We have evidence. We have patterns. We have a list of kings who ruled for impossible lengths of time, and 5 cities that archaeology says are real, and an ocean floor we have barely searched. The proof may be down there, and in the next decade, for the first time in human history, we will have the tools to go and look. The next episode turns away from the ocean floor entirely, because there is another kind of physical evidence for something unusual in human prehistory. It does not sit on the continental shelves. It does not require a ROV to find. It is in approximately 15% of the human population right now, in their blood. Episode 10, Rh-negative blood, the 15% question. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if this episode made you think, share it. The algorithm rewards engagement in the first 24 hours. Every view, every comment, every share makes a difference for a channel this size. Thanks for watching Unburied Remnants. If you like the content, please like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Stay curious. Keep digging. The rabbit hole goes deeper.